Okay, folks, we'll start. My name is Larry Cretion. I'm the Executive Director of the Green Energy Consumers Alliance. Today we have three speakers for this webinar about green municipal aggregation in Massachusetts. With me is Michaela Hundros McCarthy. Michaela has two jobs at our organization. She's our Finance Director and she's also our Renewable Energy Procurement Director. And today it's a lot about procuring renewable energy. And with us is Daria Mark. Daria works for a company that we have a wonderful relationship with. It's called Good Energy, and she will describe the work that they do and that we do together. We're happy to report today is, this year actually, is our 40th anniversary as a nonprofit organization. Started in 1982 in Boston. We now serve both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, the entire states. We still have an office in Boston, and we also have an office in Providence. It's been my pleasure to be at Green Energy Consumers for 22 years. Michaela's been with us for some time too. With that, next slide. So first, some housekeeping, as they say. Everyone's on mute because we have a lot of people in attendance. If you have questions or comments for discussion, look for the questions box. It should be on the menu on the left-hand side of your screen. Feel free to put your questions in there. We will try to get to all the questions, maybe not immediately. We might wait till the end. But we'll go through those and we'll make sure we try to touch the bases. If you need technical assistance, you can use the questions box as well, and the meeting host, Kate, will be in touch with you. This webinar is being recorded. You should be aware of that. And we'll also be sending out the recording in an email to you afterwards, along with a file showing the slides here. So some of the slides have a lot of information, and so we're not going to go through every aspect of the slide, but you'll have it for later if you want it. Next slide. So as I said, we are a nonprofit organization, and as a nonprofit, we have a mission, which is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future, or to clean energy. As I said, we started in 1982. We're in both states. And what kind of makes us unusual as an organization is that we have a number of programs that consumers can tap into. And so we sort of run ourselves as a socially responsible, socially focused business. But we also have an advocacy program where we encourage better state and local policy. And aggregation really is at the interface between our programs and our advocacy. It's by far our largest program, and we feel like we've had a great impact also on influencing public policy because of the project. Next slide. And that would be Michaela.
Thanks, Larry. So what is green municipal aggregation? Some of you may already know what it is. You may even live in a community that participates in it, but for those of you that aren't familiar with it, we'll go over it very quickly. It's when a community purchases electricity in bulk from a competitive supplier. So you're negotiating for a better price when you're doing this collectively as a community, and that's on behalf of the residents and businesses within that community. Green municipal aggregation is when the supply option adds a default additional renewable content over and above what's already required by the state. And then green municipal aggregation is also referred to as community choice aggregation or community choice electricity. So those are all used interchangeably. Why it works. So you can see by this graph that the dark green is really the additional renewable content that green municipal aggregations really drive up the demand for additional content in the state of Massachusetts. So it creates benefits without a subsidy. It's socially equitable because it makes renewable energy accessible to all of the residents within the community. It's scalable, it's an easy model to implement in different communities and repeat, and it can be implemented in the near term. So this slide kind of goes through your options as a consumer when you live in a municipality that offers green municipal aggregation. So the default offering, it's an opt-out model, so you're automatically enrolled in green municipal aggregation and that rate and the additional renewable content, unless you're already with another competitive supplier or if you opt out. A lot of communities also have opt-up options where you can go onto the website and you can elect to have 100% or 50% additional renewable content. So that's over and above what your default offering would be in your community. So this is an updated map of all of the different communities in Massachusetts, and we like to see this map get greener and greener as we go on. So the different colors represent the different levels, or the different colors of green represent the different levels of renewable content that the default option provides in these different communities. So dark green, you have a few communities in the state participating at that level. So that's 30% or above. And then the different shades going down to the lightest shade, where you can see a lot of the Cape is going down the scale of renewable content. And then the light brown has no additional class 1 RECs in the default option, but they do provide an opt-up option with Massachusetts class 1 RECs. And then the dark brown has no default or no class 1 opt-up option. Then the blue, we have a number of communities that have just been approved by the DPU that are getting their plan started. But then we have light blue, which are still currently awaiting approval for the DPU. Some of those communities have been waiting for quite some time. We do have a list of those communities on another slide, but those blue we want to see turn green as soon as possible. And Daria.
Great, thanks so much for having me. So I'll just quickly describe how we work, how Good Energy as the consultant to our communities works with Green Energy Consumers Alliance to integrate their renewable energy purchases into our programs. So as you see on the right, there's the community, and the community is getting electricity supply, but that electricity supply has two parts. It has the supply that meets the state requirements, and then there's this additional part that Michaela talked about, that green portion that lets you add additional renewable energy into the supply mix. So that additional renewable energy is competitively bid, and we have Green Energy Consumers Alliance participate in that bid, and that's our communities almost exclusively use their RECs for their aggregation programs, and it adds a really nice benefit because there's a lot greater, a lot more transparency and a lot more value to that renewable energy. So this is a graph that kind of shows where how the competitive supplier integrates with renewable energy from Green Energy Consumers Alliance once we have signed a contract for the supply to provide our communities with renewable energy from Green Energy Consumers Alliance as part of their supply, and really green up that +5, +10, +20%, whatever we are at portion. Next slide, please. This is our map of our current communities. So the map that Michaela showed first, that's the statewide map for all electricity program consultants. This is our specific map of our communities. The green portions here are shown as those that either are currently running programs or will be running green aggregation programs. And then the blue are those communities that are just running traditional programs. We do everything for our communities, from developing the plan all the way through approval and then execution and then renewals. A lot of our communities are on their third renewal now, continuing with the aggregation programs because they're so successful. We serve over 50 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and we started this with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, this green aggregation model, this idea that you could use aggregation to bring in more renewable energy into the state. And we are looking to launch our first Rhode Island programs also with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, starting sometime this year. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, we bid Green Energy Consumers Alliance against the renewable energy provided by the suppliers, the competitive suppliers, and overwhelmingly our communities choose Green Energy Consumers Alliance to provide their RECs, which is the renewable energy that they're adding for those +5, +10, et cetera. There's a great deal of benefit to having Green Energy Consumers Alliance as the provider. They use a lot of strategic buying for those for that renewable energy, and that really resonates with our communities when we talk about those who are interested in doing the Green Municipal Aggregation model. They're really interested in a transparent, vetted, clear solution to our usage of natural gas, et cetera. So they're really looking to get into more renewables and make that a really clear option for their residents. And so having Green Energy Consumers Alliance with a lot of the transparency that comes with buying through them is really, really valuable. The renewable energy is sourced entirely from New England, even though based on Mass Class 1 requirements, you could source from upstate New York or Eastern Canada. Excludes biomass. We don't use a lot of biomass in Massachusetts, but it's positive. So Green Energy Consumers Alliance excludes it, and that's another big bonus for our communities, that it's even cleaner. Long-term contracts are a big win also, that we could show direct support and important support for projects is really valuable. And very often it's the lowest cost option too. And there have been times when it wasn't, and our community still chose to go with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, which is a really big statement for the value that they see and we see in having Green Energy Consumers as part of this, the electricity supply.
Okay, so here is a list of the current GMA communities that we serve along with Good Energy. So we are the ones that provide the RECs, the renewable energy certificates, to these communities. This program, the GMA program, has grown significantly. We started off in 2016 with our first 2 communities, Dedham and Melrose, coming online. And so since then, we have 17 total now, and about half of those, maybe a little bit more, are on their second contracts. So we've had communities renew with us, which we really like, and we really hope that this list grows as soon as some of the newer communities that have been approved by the DPU come online. So where do we get our RECs from? This map is our resource map. So part of my job is to reach out to suppliers, so wind turbines and anaerobic digesters, solar developments, to contract for the RECs to supply our communities. So this is sort of where all of our resources are located. It's not all of them, but like Darius said, Massachusetts Class 1 RECs can come from Canada or New York, but we like to try to supply our communities with RECs that are generated closer to where they're located. And here is a list of the communities that have been currently approved by the DPU to start their aggregation programs. The Situate, Westwood, Cohasset, and Marshfield are communities that we expect to be working with once they do come online. And here's our list of communities that are still waiting at the DPU for the Department of Public Utilities in Massachusetts to approve their plans. Some of these communities have been waiting for a really long time, which is not ideal because we want to get these communities up and running and have them be able to start to make an impact with their aggregations. So we're really hoping that a lot of these get approved soon. All right, over to you, Larry.
Thank you, Michaela. We did receive a couple questions. I'll try to address a couple of them. You'll hear us sometimes use the word REC, and that's out of habit for some of us who are in this business. A REC is a renewable energy certificate or renewable energy credit. And what that means is that when a wind or solar project, or maybe anaerobic digestion or hydro, generates 1,000 kilowatt hours, also known as a megawatt hour, it earns the electricity revenue from that project, but it also earns a certificate, a renewable energy certificate, that it can sell separately. And utilities and other suppliers in Massachusetts need to purchase renewable energy certificates by state law, by the Renewable Portfolio Standard. And what we do with aggregation, we add to the amount of renewable energy demanded by consumers we purchase renewable energy certificates from renewable energy projects throughout New England, and then we package them up and we sell them to aggregations that want to go beyond the standard. But the way we measure how much renewable energy is being demanded is through the purchase of certificates. There's a very good system for eliminating the possibility of double counting. And so if we demand more renewable energy by purchasing certificates, someone has to produce that renewable energy in New England. So we're creating what's called additionality, and we're creating impact beyond the state requirement. So what this slide shows is, by our estimation, that all the aggregations that were shown on the map that Michaela had, plus a few more that are going to come online in the next year, we think that by 2023, the aggregations will add 1 million megawatt hours of clean electricity per year, and that's above the state's requirement for the state renewable portfolio standard. And quite frankly, we feel that this statistic is underappreciated by people in state government. And we're hoping that those of you at the local level will see that maybe your community is small and you're not sure how much impact it can have by doing aggregation. Just remember, you're part of over 100 communities that are doing some form of green aggregation. And what we've seen, as Michaela and Daria have said, oftentimes when communities do a 3-year contract and then that expires, they renew the contract, they usually increase the percentage of renewable energy that they purchase. And so by our estimation, we'll get to that 1 million megawatt hours next year. And to put it in context, that's about 300 wind turbines worth of voluntary demand, meaning it's not required by anybody. It's a community choice that enabled that to happen. And as Michaela pointed out, consumers can opt out if they want to. So it's voluntary pretty much all the way through. When I say 300 wind turbines, I'm not talking about small wind turbines. I'm talking about some of the larger ones that you may see on the landscape, perhaps in Gloucester or Scituate, and many other places around the Commonwealth. On the right-hand side shows how much of an impact aggregation has had on our organization. A few years ago, we were very proud, in 2015, we're very proud to have a program where individual businesses and households could buy green electricity, and you still can. You can go to our website and do that. But once we started working with Good Energy on aggregation, we doubled our amount of renewable energy that we were putting onto the grid, and it just kept going up year after year after year. And our organization will be directly involved in 2023 to about 250,000 megawatt hours, roughly 1/4 of the what I predict will be the case in Massachusetts. We are not serving the large communities of Boston and Worcester, but they're doing green aggregation. And I just want to be very clear, we will take credit for having started this movement along with Good Energy. Next slide. Back up. So a lot of people are always asking us, if you keep increasing demand for renewable energy, where will it come from? Well, the reality is we've grown quite a bit, and without offshore wind. And the reason is because there are projects being built throughout New England to meet the demand. The system is working as it was intended. What you may or may not know is that in New England, the 6 New England states are part of a New England power pool, and we can, the lights that are on in your house might be coming from a project in Massachusetts, but it also might be coming from a project in another New England state. And technically it's possible to import power from New York and Canada. But so the pace of renewable energy supply has kept pace with demand, but where's this going in the future? We're very happy to see that there's going to be a lot more offshore wind being developed. We would really like to meet the clean energy demand of Massachusetts with offshore wind from Massachusetts. And it's imperative. There's no question about it. It's imperative that we reduce emissions. The state law says 50% by 2030. And in order to get there, we're going to need offshore wind. In order to get to 100% by 2050, we're going to need a lot more offshore wind. So there's a good story to tell. If you go to our blog page, you can see that we're very happy that the Massachusetts House just passed House Bill 4515, and we helped write 2 provisions that are pretty exciting. They're going to increase the ability of municipal aggregations to purchase offshore wind power from future projects. And it will do that in 2 ways. One is when an offshore wind developer makes a bid for to get their project approved by the state, one of the things that will give them brownie points or a leg up would be if they're partnering with municipal aggregation. So that's the one provision we like. The other is there's a state agency that does great work called the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and they were given some authority in House Bill 4515 to spend money to support offshore wind power. And one of the things that they can spend money on is providing some financial backing to municipal aggregation so that they can enter into a contract with offshore wind. The story here goes, we're convinced that aggregation is going to continue to increase demand for renewable energy over time, but usually the aggregations have been about 3 years in duration, and the offshore wind projects need longer term contracts. So the idea that we have is that the Clean Energy Center will enter into a long-term contract for the offshore wind power, and then enter into shorter term contracts with the aggregations. So what we're trying to say here is that we're trying to create a pathway so you don't have to be Eversource or National Grid to enter into a contract with offshore wind, that local aggregations can do so as well. So next slide, and I believe it goes to Michaela again.
Yeah, so this next slide is pretty exciting for us to look at and talk about. So we discussed some of the other benefits of green municipal aggregation earlier, but another really big one and very important is that it is still price competitive while providing additional renewable content. So for the 2 utilities, we Eversource and National Grid, we showed the different basic service rates which change every 6 months. The timing depends on the different utility, but so the price fluctuates. So what green municipal aggregation does is it provides some price stability for a 2 or 3 year contract that a municipality would enter into. But then also if you compare the rates, so we've split out some different communities, especially on the left with Eversource. You have different communities in different colors. Those are communities that have additional renewable content or of 11% or above. So all of those communities, you can see Brookline in yellow, which is one of the communities we serve, kind of at their stepping up from 25% to 30% with their renewing contract in about March 2020. But then you have Newton also doing the same thing, going from 46 additional to 62% additional. But then all of the other communities that we've looked at, and that's 26 for Eversource and 23 for National Grid. Those are within that green range that you see on the graphs. So you can see that in many cases, these communities' default rates with the additional renewable content is still somewhat below the basic service rate. So these communities are getting a pretty good deal while maintaining some price stability for the duration of their contract. And especially now with the basic service rates going so high, you can see on the right side of both of these graphs, the basic service rates going upwards of 15 cents per kilowatt hour. So especially now, you would be very happy to be in a municipality that participates in aggregation, and especially green municipal aggregation. But we do like to mention that although there's a lot of evidence that's showing that a lot of these communities are being cost competitive with the great basic service rate, things can't be guaranteed. So here it's the same chart, but with the communities sort of listed out. So all of this is publicly available information. We of course know the rates that the communities that participate in our program are paying, but you can go online and find the rates of a lot of the other communities in the state that are participating in green municipal aggregation as well. So again, we have 26 communities participating in that we have in these graphs for Eversource, and then we have 23 for National Grid. And the very exciting information that we'll include in our next iteration of the GMA report is that on average, we found that Eversource communities with additional renewable content of 11% or below have saved 1.35 cents per kilowatt hour versus the basic service rate since August of 2017. And then we did the same thing for the National Grid communities. So out of the 23 communities that we've looked at, the communities that have 11% or less additional renewable content saved almost the same amount, 1.35 cents per kilowatt hour versus the basic service rate since December 2018, which is as far back as the data that we have goes. All right, Larry.
Yes, so here's a slide that you can get more information from. You can go to our website, to our blog page, or you can go to Attorney General Maura Healey's webpage. A few years ago, she started doing reports. They've done 3 reports out of her office. She hired an expert who looked at what competitive electricity suppliers were charging consumers. Those are competitive of the type that she was looking at. Those are the ones who sign up customers one at a time. I bet many of you have received phone calls or a lot of direct mail asking you to sign up for their electricity program. And they usually come at you at a time when the utility, National Grid or Basic Service, National Grid or Eversource has raised their rate. And they'll offer you a price that's a bit less. But if you look at the fine print, they reserve the right to raise their rate over time. It's an adjustable rate. And so what happened over the years, the Attorney General's office has done 3 reports. And over 5 years, consumers in Massachusetts paid $426 million more on electricity than if they had stayed with the utility basic service. Now, there's a couple of points that are worth mentioning. They were looking at the people who signed up individually. They didn't. What they did not compare was municipal aggregation to basic service. Michaela already just showed you that aggregation is, by our math, seems to be showing savings over basic service. And so it's important that people realize that these electricity suppliers who are going after consumers are generally ripping people off. The Attorney General has actually called for an end to that that business. And here's what's important: low income consumers are twice as likely to be ripped off than the rest of us. And so too much of that $426 million is being charged to people who can least afford it. So what we're trying to tell you is there are 3 ways you can buy electricity if you are a National Grid, Eversource, or Unitil customer. You can buy it through basic service with the utility. You can go to one of these competitive electricity suppliers on your own, or you can get your community to do municipal aggregation. And what we're telling you is, I think the data is pointing us all to the fact that municipal aggregation is by far the best deal, not just in terms of renewable energy, and it is, but also in terms of just saving people money and being fair. The electricity supply that is approved for your community the whole process of how it gets to the consumer. First, the community has to vote on whether or not it's going to have an aggregation program. Then it goes to the State Department of Public Utilities for their approval. And then a company like Good Energy puts it out to bid and uses the competitive market to work on your behalf. If they find out that the timing's not right and that it wouldn't be advantageous for a community to sign a contract, they can work with the community and delay it until it is a good time. So what we're finding is that method of being able to time the purchase of electricity works quite well. So we really want to point out that aggregation is one of the most equitable ways of buying energy, but in particular buying clean energy. Next slide. I think it's Daria.
Thanks, Larry. So there's a couple of interesting things that are coming ahead for aggregation and through the state. Utilities, National Grid and Eversource have filed 5-year grid modernization plans. So they're looking to bring in upgraded metering and software that could allow them to use those meters, especially time varying rates is an interesting one for us and for aggregations, because you could do things like charge your car at night when electricity to a supplier electricity is cheaper than during the day. And they could offer that savings to you if there's a meter and the systems to meter those charges that can vary by day or night. So a good thing for the grid, a good thing for you as a consumer, and obviously a good thing for our transition towards more electrification on all fronts. And then the other really exciting thing that we're watching that's coming also is community shared solar. So I'm sure many of you have heard that there's community shared solar you can sign up for. You know, the slight drawback there is that there's 2 different bills, and you have to, you get some parts on your electric bill and some parts you have to pay separately. What we could do, assuming that the state approves this, is bring in aggregation and community shared solar together, where, you know, as Larry was mentioning, there's a lot of detrimental competitive supply to low-income customers. Well, this could be a really big benefit to low-income customers, where there could be a guaranteed savings that community shared solar could bring to low-income customers through aggregation, where it's an opt-out model, just like the aggregation itself. And there could be guaranteed savings because community shared solar brings you those at 10–15%, depending on the project. So a lot of really big benefits that are coming down the line that we're watching and looking at carefully. Back to you, Larry and Michaela.
Okay, thank you. So as Michaela indicated, we've done 2 reports in showing people the progress of aggregation, and the last one was 2 years ago, and we are doing another one. We're hoping to have it done for today, but it's not. But you're getting a sneak preview. It'll be published hopefully by the end of March. But really, you've already seen the main points of our report. The first main point is the fact that we're adding a lot of renewable energy, more than required by state law. And then by our estimation, 1 million megawatt hours of power equivalent to 300 wind turbines. And then, as Michaela just pointed out, all the aggregations, when we look at what they've been paying compared to basic service, we're seeing it's basically 1.3 cents per kilowatt or less than basic service. And that's for communities that have more renewable energy than required by law, so between 5 and 11% more than required by state law. And so it's pretty impressive when you think of it. Those are the two big takeaways. And then the third piece is we think that it's absolutely the most equitable thing to do. I guess another point we'll be making, if you could go to the next slide. One of the big takeaways we want to point out, we've already had a slide showing the Department of Public Utilities, in many cases, has taken several months or a year to get their plan approved by the Department of Public Utilities. So we showed you a list of communities that have been waiting for a long, long time. We've never received an adequate answer from the Department of Public Utilities. It's kind of hard for a given community to complain too much because you don't want to go to the bottom of the pile. Most of the plans that are submitted by communities are very, very similar. I say that the DNA of the plans are probably 90% the same. The companies like Good Energy and their competitors all know what is required of them by the Department of Public Utilities. So they submit plans that are pretty much, boilerplate, as they say, and they're just taking a long time. It's frustrating for communities. There are several communities that could have avoided the increase in prices that basic service experienced this winter if they were approved a few months ago, as they should have been. And hopefully they'll be approved soon. We think that the should be a higher priority of the governor and of state government because we're showing people it's almost a perfect answer to how we make a transition to clean energy, both in terms of renewable energy and in terms of saving people money. So then the other point is we talked about the environmental benefits, economic benefits, and equity, and we'll cover those all in the report that's coming out. I want to address a couple of questions in that we received. The state has a minimum renewable energy requirement, and then it's possible that if you opt up, how would that work? So it is possible through our program for you to buy more than 100% renewable energy for your home. And so what happens to that? Actually, the grid is pretty big, and basically you're going to help put more renewable energy on than you use, but it's going to help clean up the grid for the rest of us. And in some communities, maybe 10% of the population has decided to opt up, and so that's happening. And so, and in those communities, if you do opt up to 100%, and you're a community that's served by Good Energy and by Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we will track your usage, and every January we send out a letter to you indicating that you've paid so much above the cost of basic service, and that amount you can deduct from your taxes, your federal taxes, if you itemize charitable contributions. And the reason being is because when you buy renewable energy through a program like this, you're not benefiting personally, you are benefiting society, and the Internal Revenue Service has given us the go-ahead to confer tax deductibility for people who itemize. So until we get to 100% renewable energy for every consumer in Massachusetts, residential and business customers, anything you do through aggregation is speeding the transition. When we get to 100%, then we will be thinking about what we do with of whether or not we want to go beyond that. But we're going to need a lot more renewable energy in order to solve our climate problem. Maynard has a question. Is a small community, should we be trying to partner with other communities? Must those also be Eversource served communities? You can partner with say Good Energy. We recommend as a consultant, but it's oftentimes just simpler and easier for a community to work individually. The rates that Good Energy can get a community sometimes are not better by the complication of pooling the communities, but sometimes the circumstances may differ from community to community. So we'd recommend that you look into it, and you might want to partner with some communities but it takes a lot of work to get all the communities on the same page. Next slide. So just wanted to remind everybody, this is our 40th anniversary. We're very excited about that. We're going to start having some in-person events if we feel that it's safe to do so this later spring, summer, and fall. Well, we're going to have a spring meeting in Rhode Island, in Providence, Rhode Island, the week before Memorial Day. And then we're going to have hopefully a nice party in Boston in the fall, date to be determined. But we encourage people to make sure they're vaccinated and boosted and all that, and still be vigilant about COVID. But we hope that things are moving in the right direction, and we'll get out there to meet you all personally. But not many nonprofits last 40 years, and we're very proud of the fact that we keep growing and being some part of the solution to our problems. Next slide. So we're really pleased that this month a generous donor has offered to match donations to our organization, offering to match up to $20,000. And so if you are so inclined, if you think that we're doing good work on aggregation or green electricity, or perhaps the work that we're doing to promote electric vehicles or the public policies that we're promoting, any of those things, you can learn more about us at greenenergyconsumers.org, and then you can donate at greenenergyconsumers.org/donate. So if you want to donate $100, that donor will add another $100 to the kitty, and our goal is to catch every one of those $20,000 that they're offering to match. And I think that's it for the last slide, Michaela.
Yep, that's it.
All right, so let's review some questions that maybe we didn't answer. Kate or anybody, if you want to make sure we didn't forget anything. Here's one. Carolyn's asking, I've forgotten, what is the current Massachusetts minimum renewable portfolio standard? It moves every year, of course, and so I even have trouble remembering it, but I believe it's 22% in 2022, or no, sorry, 24%, and it's scheduled to go up 2 or 3% until 2030. And if the renewable portfolio standard is a great policy, but it doesn't get us to where we need to be by 2030, or particularly by 2050. And so the idea of aggregation is to build upon that. Then we were asked, how does the program work for seniors who cannot deduct their marked up green energy from their fixed retirement payments? So a lot of us don't itemize, and so unfortunately you cannot get a tax deduction for your by opting up in that case. So it is unfortunately limited to people who would have who would itemize. And we will send out slides. Some of the slides have quite a bit of information. You can look at them, particularly the map. We'll send that out after this, along with the entire recording. Here's a question. Which municipal department deals with aggregation? Well, excellent question. Which door to bang on first? I like the way you put that. What we've found, and Daria, maybe you can help me out. we find it often starts with a community activist, like those of you who are on the call, talking to perhaps a selectman or a city councilor or to the mayor. But usually, I think Good Energy, when you get into the details of things, you're working with the town manager or the mayor's office, or what would you say, the purchasing department?
Yeah, so you're correct, Larry, that there's two different parts. There's who starts the process and then who executes the process once it's already running. So who starts the process, if you're looking into your community and you have maybe an energy committee or a sustainability committee, that is where you definitely want to start. And then if you don't have one, maybe there's an elected official or an appointed official who'd be interested in championing this. And for town meetings, you need to get a town warrant article passed to approve the process. And then once that's approved in city, it's a city council resolution. And so once that approval is there, we work then with the municipal officials, staff, to draft the plan and get through all the regulatory requirements. Hope that helps.
I do want to answer another question. Someone asked, if a community like Maynard was to join, was to partner up with other communities, did those other communities have to have the same utility? So Maynard, I guess, is served by Eversource. And I think the answer, Dara, you're working with groups of communities that they don't necessarily have to have the same utility. But
that's correct. So it's the grouping is an interesting question. It's especially something that small communities wonder about because they're not sure if their size, we always think of like the Costco buying model of like the bigger the better and the better deal is, but that's not always the correlation in electricity purchases. So I would say if you're really interested in getting your aggregation program going, start with getting the approval that you need. We as an energy consulting firm, we help a lot of our communities get through that process also if you'd like to work with us ahead of time. Once you have the approval, then you would hire an energy consultant. We think Good Energy is the best choice, of course. And then after that, you need to get through all the regulatory steps. And after the regulatory approval is in hand, we can look at whether or not grouping makes sense or not. It depends what other communities have been approved around the same time. Utilities don't always make a break. Like, you could partner with National Grid, but with the community that has National Grid, but sometimes that doesn't make sense. So don't put the grouping or not grouping first. Start with the getting approval in your local municipality, and then getting that plan drafted and getting the plan to the DPU. And then we could work on, does it make sense to group with which communities, with which, there's also electricity zones. So all those other things we'll work with you on. And definitely our interest is always trying to provide the best, strongest program. Sometimes that means grouping, sometimes that doesn't.
Right. Thank you. Daria, there's another comment. It's not a question. Somebody praising your work at Good Energy in helping communities get the word out about how people can opt up after their community gets rolling. And also helping to explain the other options, how one can opt out if they need to. It's very important that we present all the options to people. So that's good work there. Another question, do we have any idea or any inkling by when the communities that are waiting to be approved by the state will be approved by the state? Honestly, we have no idea. It is unfortunately a black box. And I would say because they've gone on for so long, that within a few months. Now that sounds very fuzzy, I know that, but I certainly wouldn't want to say that they're going to be done in a month, and I don't see why they should take another year. Then another question was, do we do presentations to town officials to help them better understand the benefits? We do, and so does Good Energy. And sometimes we do them together when we're invited. And I would say if your community's not doing an aggregation, the best message you can tell them is they would not be trying something new. I think that's the main point. There's about 165 communities have some form of aggregation. Probably 80% of the population of Massachusetts is covered. and over 100 communities are doing green aggregation. And so with all due respect to communities that are not doing aggregation, they're laggards, and so that there won't be being the first test case by any means. And so we'd be happy to explain anything to a community. Then somebody asked, is it possible for a community to, if they have a broker that's not good energy, to choose good energy? I don't know if Daria wants to address that. I would say it is possible legally. You would have some contract with that broker that you have that you wouldn't want to break. And then there's also the contract that the town might have with an electricity supplier that also would have to run its course before they switched suppliers. Daria, do you want to touch that one?
Yeah, I think that's correct. It's not legally prohibited. You are not bound to your consultant. Theoretically, you could switch. We haven't seen communities do that because there's just a lot of parts that come to it.
Yeah. Looking for other questions. Kate, Michaela.
There was a question about how, if there was any recommendations we have for individual citizens to reach out to or to lobby state government to move the DPU along.
Well, I would suggest contacting, hopefully you have some familiarity with your state senator or your state representative. You could contact them and ask them to see what they can do.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please do.
It's also interesting to see what other states are doing, right? Like Rhode Island has just started on their aggregation, and their plans are approved in about a 2-month span. Now, the first plans took some time. They really dug into it, but now we submit plans, and it's about a 2.5 month at most approval time. So very different from Massachusetts, where our last plans were approved in 2 years. And then New Hampshire, another state that's just starting their aggregation road, they have a requirement. Their Department of Energy, which is the equivalent of our DPU, more or less, has 60 days to review the plan. And if they don't say something, the plan is automatically approved. They have a slightly different structure for local approval, but it's interesting to see what other states are able to do also.
That's a good point, Daria. You know, there's another aspect to this. Sometimes somebody in a community or Good Energy, or we do at Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we have ideas on how to change a community's aggregation to do something new. We know that what we've been doing is incredibly effective, but sometimes somebody wants to add a new feature. Maybe community shared solar, or using the aggregation to help pay for a project in the community that's clean energy. Could be solar, it could be a microgrid, it could be storage, it could be electric school buses, whatever. And in order to get those things approved, you have to go to the back of the line at the Department of Public Utilities, and you might have to wait another year to get your project approved. So that's frustrating for us all, and that needs to be sped up as well. If I could just be a nudge here and hammer home. Right now, Massachusetts is doing a lot of work trying to figure out how are we going to get to 50% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. And then, of course, we want to do it in the economically smartest ways to do that, right? So we're talking about big new policies, big new programs that would affect how much offshore wind we're going to buy, how much solar we're going to buy. What are we going to do about, are we going to purchase Canadian hydro? Are we going to have big policies involving heat pumps and decarbonizing buildings? And then what are we going to do for transportation? Are we going to increase ridership on the MBTA and other regional transit authorities? Are we going to shift to electric buses? Are we going to have policies that shift people to electric cars, walking and biking, all these ideas that we need to do? And I guess our point is this one policy more than pays for itself, and it's proven itself, and it would be kind of an easy thing for the state to help aggregation move even further than it's already come. Any other questions? I think we might be just about done.
One more minute.
All right. Our contact information is in the slides. You'll get an email from us. And so if any questions occur to you after you get the slides, after you get the email, you can send it to us and we will try to respond.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Daria. Thank you, Good Energy. And thank you, as always, Michaela and Kate.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Bye.